All right, got the whole crew back in here. Some of my favorite people. Welcome back.
Yo, thank you.
Yay.
Good to have you guys. I want to talk about supplements today. I've been, as of late, I actually had quite a few questions about a couple of supplements that I take, and people kind of like to get into the rabbit hole on things, and it's very interesting to me for me to find out kind of what they're taking and what their mindset is around their thought process about kind of what they're putting in their body outside of managing their quote unquote nutrition and their intake from like a caloric perspective, macronutrient perspective, all those other things. You know, these are people that are generally trying to be healthier, right, in general, but are also trying to perform, look better, feel better kind of stuff. And, I oftentimes overcommit to these messages in the system, and they start to go on, and a couple days later, we're still going back and forth about stuff. So that'd be cool if maybe we just handled our top 5 list of supplements, and people may, kind of go, oh, yep, I'm already doing that. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. And other people maybe, I hadn't thought of that, or I need to take a little maybe deeper look into what I'm doing to benefit what I'm trying to obtain from taking my supplements. People spend a lot of money on supplements, which always also surprises me when people send me their list of stuff. And I'm like, wow, like the investment that people make into this stuff hasn't changed. Stephen and I have done a few episodes, lots of episodes actually, on different types of supplements. And we've talked about the state of that industry before and how it's set up to continue to grow. I mean, it's billions of dollars. When you look at it globally, and certainly here in the United States, we saw a huge uptick in the last few years, probably the last 4 years, due to some of the events. We're actually going to talk about one of those that got really popular then in this episode. But just giving people some maybe a little bit different perspective on how to look at things, and maybe a little bit deeper insight to making sure they're getting things covered while also getting what they want out of this investment that they're making in both their health and then obviously financially. So anyway, top 5 supplements. I mean, there's so many of them out there, right? And when you start, we've broken this down before, just kind of how we categorize things. If you're looking at things from like a performance perspective, you can look at like performance type supplements. And some of those would be really obvious. Like when you look at things like caffeine or pre-workout stuff. And we've talked about that kind of ad nauseum. The other thing you kind of look at is like, what are we looking for, like for hormonal balance, right? If that's a goal or a thing that somebody's trying to kind of maybe attack a little bit. The other thing we can look at is like gut health. And there's lots of things that go into that. Liver health is another one of those things when we start talking about like the gut, the brain, and the liver and how those things all interact. But I think most people don't really go that deep into it, but they are very specific and they have an idea of why they're choosing a very specific thing. When you get to like, I think you're either a pre-workout user or you're not, right? I'm a not, right? But I talk to a lot of people that are, and they want to ask me about these products. I'm like, look, dude, I have no experience with that. Like, not that I don't have any experience with pre-workouts. I've done those before. I've used several before, and I don't like them. I don't like the way they make me feel. But at the same time, I have realized some training benefit from those. So I'm not discounting those at all, but that's not what we're getting into today. Yeah. And then there's kind of other categories like food product supplements. When you start looking at things like protein bars or things that you're supplement like for greens and things like that. We've talked about that on the show before, but we're going to kind of get into more of the nitty gritty when it comes to really honing in on some specifics that we love, that we use ourselves, and also recommend frequently, like daily, to people to try to get them to maybe kind of, again, round off the edges of some of the stuff that they could be doing to be doing a little bit better. And at the same time, get them outside of thinking that there's a one size fits all. So anyway, let's go down the list here. Steven, where do you want to start?
Well, we can start with D3K2, which is it's technically 2 different supplements, or obviously 2 different vitamins, but my recommendation is that you take them at the same time.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So first off, vitamin D got really popular back when we had that thing happen a few years back, and there was a lot of blood work happening. There was a lot of autopsies happening. There was a lot of things happening in the medical community, and D got really popular, and kind of, it had already been well understood.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it got really popular back then, but as far as in the performance, as far as with athletes, especially athletes in the Midwest and then in the Northeast where, wintertime comes and stuff like that.
A lot less sunlight.
A lot less sunlight. It was popularized, I think, early 1990s.
Yeah, so I think, again, it kind of hit the scene again. There's a lot of talk about it, and there was a lot of research that kind of reemerged, and some people were doing some other things with it. And obviously, there were supplement companies that sold a lot of it as a result. There are a lot of retailers that made a lot of money off of vitamin D. I'll put that in air quotes. And now it's kind of like you're actually seeing it on other labels, like your full dose of vitamin D in this particular food or this particular brand of whatever product they're trying to sell. So again, just from a marketing perspective, awareness drives marketing, marketing drives awareness. People are going to market that however they can to put cash in the register. But going back to the D3K2, I think we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, and I know we've got blog articles on it. And we've got another free guide that people can get into just in supplements I'll mention sort of later. But anyway, let's talk about D3K2, why the two, sort of important parts from a high level, and then break it down.
So as you alluded to a few years ago, vitamin D had a bit of a renaissance thanks to its benefits for immune function. So that's probably the first thing that people think about when they think about taking vitamin D. And I will get a little more specific here. In terms of, vitamin D in air quotes, there's vitamin D2 and there's vitamin D3. The main difference there is vitamin D2, ergocalciferol, that is the vitamin D that is produced by plants. So both plants and animals synthesize vitamin D via the sun. The version that plants create is D2. The version that people or animals create is D3, cholecalciferol. So the vitamin D3, I would recommend humans taking. So if you're any humans out there who are listening, that would be the one that I would recommend taking, because that is the version that your body synthesizes naturally from the sun. That's the version that you will most likely be deficient in if you're in the Midwest or the Northeast or in the Arctic Circle or somewhere where you're not getting a lot of sunlight. If you are vegan and you are hardcore vegan, then you might want to go with the D2, but your body is not going to recognize that quite as well as the D3. The D3 is technically derived from animal sources, sheep's wool, lanolin. For any Anchorman fans out there, lanolin, that is actually where D3 is derived from, the supplemental D3. So if you are absolutely no animal products whatsoever, D2. So let's talk about, aside from immune function, what else are we getting from our D3? So from D3, we're also talking about bone health is a big one. Mood is also a big one. D3 is typically recommended for a seasonal affective disorder. So in those parts of the world or, parts of the country.
My Seattle friends.
Yeah, where sunlight is limited for extended periods of time throughout the year, that tends to increase the incidence of the seasonal affective disorder. It's the wintertime, it's dark and sad. D3 deficiency could be a reason for that. So mood impact, and then also, cardiovascular health, arterial health. And that's really where the K2 comes in as well. How D3 and K2 work together as far as bone health and cardiovascular health.
Yeah, so it starts to break it down on to more of a cellular level. And so cellular metabolism is what we're kind of getting into without getting too deep into the weeds on this, and how it actually functions inside the body. So there's one thing to be getting D from the sun. There's other, and obviously you can get it from food, and then you can get it through supplementation. But, if you're putting that in there, especially if you're investing in this stuff and you're kind of searching long and hard to find the right supplement or supplements for you, just because you're putting it in there doesn't mean your body is doing a great job of utilizing it. And so there's getting it in, then there's the cellular metabolism that kind of happens, and then there's you're getting it in, and then there's this uptake. I just mentioned that a few minutes ago about gut health, those that have poor gut health, and that can be like a diagnosis of certain things. Some people know about those things that they have or don't have. Some people just have stuff that they don't understand. But the uptake of this is extremely important, and the quality of what you're taking and what you're onboarding with it is important in that sense. But once it gets in there, talk about the K2, because I think this is where people could probably use a little bit of some insight.
So to not get too deep into it, essentially it kind of boils down to calcium absorption and what vitamin D3 and K2 do in conjunction to make sure that the calcium that you're getting from your diet and calcium that you may be supplementing with, if like women who are diagnosed with osteoporosis, things like that, calcium is a pretty commonly recommended supplement. We could talk about taking magnesium with that as well. There's kind of a 4 horsemen: calcium, magnesium, D3, K2. However, when it comes to calcium absorption, we want calcium getting shuttled to our bones. We don't want an excess of calcium in our bloodstream. That excess of calcium in the bloodstream is what can lead to the calcification of our arteries, which is bad. Stiffening, hardening of the arteries. So taking the K2 in conjunction with the D3, both of those work together in order to get calcium into your bones where you want it to improve your bone density versus too much of it floating around in your bloodstream where you don't want it.
Yeah. So again, going back to like, how are you onboarding your D? What type of D are you taking or inputting? Again, from a supplementary perspective. And then what are you onboarding with it to make sure it's doing what it's doing? So in short, basically K2 tells D3 what to do, right? Or helps it in its process in terms of navigating the system while also mitigating those effects of kind of that buildup within the bloodstream, which for some people that might not be a concern at all. It should be somewhat of a concern, especially as we get older and hormonal things change hormonally in terms of how we process those things. But just in general, like if you're trying to be healthier, perform well, look better, feel better, all of those things, it just makes sense.
Isn't vitamin D one of those things where it's a fat soluble? So you have to take it. You should take it with food or with a meal that has fat in it.
Yeah, both D3 and K2 are both fat soluble vitamins. So you're just a quick little fat soluble 101. Fat soluble vitamins are going to be vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, and vitamin K. And your water soluble vitamins will be your B vitamins. B vitamins and vitamin C. So main difference there. A water soluble vitamin like vitamin B or vitamin C, if you really tried, you could overdose on those, but you're going to urinate out those. You're going to flush them out. They're water soluble versus a fat soluble vitamin. Those could actually be stored in your body in your fat cells. So over time, if you're chronically over ingesting any of those fat soluble vitamins, that could lead to some problems over time. But to take it back to what you said, yes, fat soluble vitamins would be a good idea to take with food, preferably fat.
So where am I going to find this D3K2 compounds, if you will? Like if I was out there buying supplements, where do I kind of look for those things?
As far as like where in the store or where?
Great question. So let me be more clear. Like if I am in the store and I'm looking at a bottle of things, should I be searching for this in a standalone? Should I be searching for it in a combination of things, like a multivitamin? How should I be looking at that?
So probably most common ways you'll see it is a multivitamin. So yeah, that may be the first question. Well, I'm taking a multivitamin. Am I getting what I need through my multivitamin? A well put together multivitamin should have vitamin D in it. The dosage is where you may want to look a little bit closer as far as how much are you getting. Most multivitamins, because it's literally just a matter of logistics, there's only so much you can fit in a single capsule or single tablet. So your dosing may not be the same as if you're getting something isolated by itself. But a multivitamin might have 1,000 IU, 2,000 IU of vitamin D3. When it comes to K2, you may not see that at all. Some multivitamins actually do not include vitamin K because vitamin K can have blood thinning effects, and it can interact with things like warfarin or something like that if you're taking a blood thinner. So vitamin K you may not see in your multivitamin at all. However, if you are, it's probably, again, going to be a lower dosage. So you can think, okay, I'm already taking a multivitamin, evaluate how much vitamin D is in there. Is there vitamin K in there at all? And then you may want to think about getting a standalone product, which is very, very common to see D3 and K2 in the same product. And that may be more like a 5,000 unit, 4,000, 5,000 unit of vitamin D, vitamin K, K2. You may see it as MK7 is a popular form. It's like a trademarked form of K2. That's usually like 90 to 180 micrograms. So that's that MCG, not milligrams, micrograms.
So bigger picture, like again, you may be getting 1,000 to 2,000 IUs of D in your multivitamin, but
maybe.
Yeah. So have a look at that. The next part is like, well, how much should I be taking? Right. So again, there's a lot of conversation around this over the last couple of years, but most of the experts, and like when I say experts, I mean people that are actually dealing with this and talking about it at the same time, they'll agree it should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 IUs. I think I've mentioned this before. We take a pretty high potency multivitamin on a daily basis. In fact, there's 4 fairly large capsules I get in a couple of times a day, and I'm hyper aware of what my vitamin D is because I do have it measured in my blood work frequently. Mm-hmm. And I take an additional D3K2 supplement on top of that, which is 5,000 IUs and I believe it's 160 milligrams on the K2 side, or micrograms, sorry, on the K2 side. So that boosts me somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7,000 IUs a day. So my goal is somewhere between 5 and 8. That's for me. I'm not saying you have to do that, but again, going back, like most experts will tell you, like, look, 5,000 IUs a day is probably a pretty good place to be hanging out. I can tell you anecdotally, I just recently had my blood work done about 6 weeks ago, and I had, for whatever reason, I'd just gotten a little bit lazy and fallen off my regular daily dosages of multivitamins. Maybe you've heard Cece and I talk about this before. We have our little pill containers or little capsule containers that are for all the days of the week. They're easy to travel with, easy to pack up if we're hitting the road or whatever. So, and I like it because I don't have to fish through all the bottles every day to get into it. And I can see basically there's very objective feedback on whether I hit my goal for the week or not.
I'll go to film and I'm like, so how do we do this week?
Yeah. So I had
quite a few left in here. Yeah.
I had fallen off for about a 6-week period. So I had my blood work done and I'd fallen off for about 6 weeks there. And I was fairly conscious of this, but at the same time, I had then started to pick it back up pre-blood work. And interesting how things like that will motivate you. Oh shit, I'm gonna get quote unquote tested. I gotta put this back in. Met with my doc and he's like, look, I noticed your vitamin D dropped way off. And I was like, yep, well, here's the explanation for that. And so I only say that to say, like, this is something that can be measured and you can see through regular blood work. And not that you have to go out and have your blood work done. I'm just saying, I know exactly where I was falling down on that. And it made a significant impact objectively from a data perspective on my blood work. And as a result, it motivated me to make sure I'm freaking getting that stuff in. Yeah. Again, the quality of what you're taking makes a difference here and where you're kind of getting it from. And again, K2 on top of your D3, how much are you taking? All those things are factors. So, again, saying all that to say, like, it matters, in terms of how you're intaking it. And, so we'll give you sort of some direction on maybe where to go get a product that we really like and talk about frequently and recommend frequently at the end. But yeah, great job on that one.
Is there an upper limit that you want to be concerned with? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. What I typically suggest, because if some is good, more is better. Yes, that tends to be how we think when it comes to both vitamin D and K2, because they are fat-soluble vitamins. You don't want to be chronically taking a massive dose. So you could take high doses for a short period of time, but I usually suggest no more than about 10,000 units of vitamin D as your daily dose. But I have seen people, a few years ago, pandemic time, I saw people take 50,000 units a day for like 7 days. And that was usually what I would recommend. I'm like, don't take this for any more than 7 days. If you really want to, drop the D3 nuke on this thing, go 50,000 units for a week.
Yep.
And then dial it back. You definitely do not want to be taking that high of a dose for that long. So
is the assumption that so many people are just like the average person is kind of chronically underutilizing this, because even when I first started to hear about this and I was taught this in school and things, there was like some concern because of being fat soluble of people taking too much. Yeah. Is it a little bit safer now just because it's a little bit assumed from dietary aspect that people are going to be kind of chronically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have something to say about that.
Yeah, so to begin, there's not a lot of food sources of vitamin D.
Yeah.
So it's primarily going to be from sunlight, and we are an increasingly indoors and sedentary type of society. So it is chronically deficient. In terms of, the dosing, that's usually like that 5,000 to 10,000 range is about as much as I would suggest. Like that's more the upper limit, and hanging out 2,000 to 5,000 is a good spot for a lot of people. The recommended, like the bare minimum recommendation is 400 units, which for most people, that's like that's the don't die dose. Yeah. So, you can certainly exceed that dose quite a bit, but that 10,000 is usually about as high as I suggest. And then for K2, I think the recommendation is like no more than like 360 micrograms. So basically double what you may find in a single dosage in a supplement.
I mean, I guess the thing is go get your blood work done and have your vitamin D levels, checked. So then you have an idea of where you're starting. And then as you're starting to increase your supplementation, if you need to do that for vitamin D, then you can retest in like 5 to 6 months.
Yeah, we've talked about repletion doses versus maintenance doses. So if you're initially deficient, you may want to take a higher dose initially, and then you begin to dial that back to more of a maintenance dose when your levels return to normal.
Two things that come up for me there. One is when I first kind of started on my journey of really getting a handle on all this for myself, this was going back a little more than 10 years now, is I was taking a lot of things or inputting a lot of things, but not really not being able to measure it. Like it was just like, I know I should be doing these things and trying to do my best at doing that. When I started doing that, my vitamin D was pretty low. And so going back to that initial dosage that the doc recommended, he gave me for a 4-week period, 20,000 IUs a day. And then I backed that off to that 5 to 8 level. So I remember that very significantly. And it made an immediate impact, and so there was this uptick. Let's replete. Let's get some stuff back in there, in a sense, kind of load up the system, if you will, and then we can back it off. And that way, now you're in a maintenance phase. The other thing that came up for me, and the question that you asked about years ago, so I was a nutrition student, and I remember hearing these things and reading about these things, and they were based those recommended doses and the fears and things that existed around there. And these were based on the recommended daily allowances. And so if you go from 400 to 5,000, obviously that is a massive uptick. But the point of that being is, I don't think it was really well understood at that point. Again, the 400 is the don't die dose. Yeah. Right. So, as it started to uptick or whatever, there's a lot more research and a lot more stuff that's come out. I don't know what the textbooks say now. I really don't. I'd kind of be afraid to go back and kind of see how much it has changed, and only to see how wrong the institution was for a long time, and how it has shifted based on the push from the market as well as from the medical and pharmaceutical and supplement industries, and how things have changed and how that research has picked up. But those are two things I remember kind of going to the past. So if you've been, I've been taking vitamin D forever. Maybe just recheck back in and kind of see where you're at on that note. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Let's get to the next one, which is one of my favorites. It seems to be a favorite of a lot of people. Again, it kind of had a little reemergence, and that is creatine. Let's talk about creatine because I love that one.
Oh, yeah. Creatine has definitely had a major reemergence in the last couple of years, going from, sort of like the I just want to get jacked supplement that sometimes people think is like steroids, or creatine. Isn't that bad for your kidneys? Isn't that going to damage your liver?
Getting that.
Yeah. Isn't that, I don't know, that creatine stuff. Should my high school son who's playing football be taking creatine? He's a little young. Versus now, more and more research has emerged. Number one, creatine is like the most researched supplement in the history of the game. There is more evidence backing the effectiveness of creatine than basically any other supplement. And everything we'll talk about today are well researched. And that's why they're, in our list. Like there is evidence for the benefit of all of these things. But creatine, I would say the biggest shift with creatine is that it's become more of a longevity supplement. And that's primarily based on the positive effects it has on brain health. So now all of a sudden creatine has gone from, I'm just a 25-year-old who's trying to get yoked to I am, a senior who's trying to maintain muscle mass and also maintain my cognitive function.
I don't even know about a senior, but I mean, I'm pushing 50. I don't think I'm a senior yet.
Anybody. Yeah. That's kind of
everywhere in between.
Yeah. I mean, really, creatine, I would say, is perfectly safe and helpful for teenagers all the way to, senior citizens. So,
yeah. Stephen and I did a pretty in-depth podcast on creatine because we were getting so many questions, and it was kind of reemerging. It was like, well, we should talk about it and just kind of give our take on it. It's to date in the history of the Iron Size podcast, one of the most, I think it's number 3 or 4 now in terms of most downloaded podcasts. Got a lot of attention. YouTube seems to love it. People are watching still. And, it answers a lot of questions on kind of like what creatine is, how it functions in the body, why it's important, very specifically to performance and brain health, as that obviously trickles over into health and wellness and just longevity. So it's one of those ones that covers all the angles on that triangle of awareness that we've talked about so many times in the past. And it is really for everybody. There's very few contraindications to this, if any, that I'm aware of right now.
Yeah. Other than, if you take too much, it's going to give you the runs. That's probably about as bad as it's going to get.
I think the most common thing I still hear, and some people think this is like the effect. I think a lot of people still don't really know the mechanism of it, is they think of like the water retention.
It's going to make me bloated.
It's going to make me bloated. But some people I actually talk to, some bros, is they think it's like, it makes you look like fuller. It makes me
which is true.
Yeah. Which is a component of it. But I think that's a lot of the fear is like the hydration component with it.
Yeah. Oh, I tried some creatine. It made me bloated. Or, it is women often, creatine's going to make me puffy. It's going to make me heavy. Or, I feel, puffy, whatever, bloated. There is going to be some increase in water retention. It is creatine by design is going to pull some water to your muscles, which is going to actually help the cell signaling.
Which is good.
It's going to play a role in an increase in muscle mass. So yes, there could be some water retention that people do experience. My suggestion with that, if you're concerned with it, maybe start with a lower dose versus the standard dose of creatine monohydrate is 5 grams per day. Loading phase, we can touch base on that. The loading phase, in my opinion, is not necessary unless maybe you are a vegan and you're getting no creatine from your diet. Creatine does appear in animal protein. So if you are consuming animal protein, you should be getting some creatine from your diet. If you do not consume any animal protein, then perhaps a loading phase of creatine for a week, you go 10 to 20 grams a day. Even just saying the 20 grams, I'm like, that makes my stomach hurt. That may be necessary, but for most people, 5 grams per day is the standard dose, but maybe start with 2 grams, maybe start with 3 grams, see how your stomach reacts to it. That's probably the number one side effect I hear about is just some digestive discomfort or a little bit of GI issue or GI upset. So just start with a little bit of a lower dose, and maybe you can, you can avoid a little bit of that bloating or water retention.
Yeah, again, just on the creatine side of things, it's a hot topic kind of all the time, or it has been as of late. It just kind of keeps coming up, and I think people are interested in it, and they're still a little unsure about it. If you have more questions on it, again, we went in depth on it on this one. It's episode number 83. Go back and listen to that one for some more detail on creatine. But the point of that being number 2 on the list is, again, going back to that triangle of awareness and what people are generally trying to attempt by taking or by utilizing, dietary supplements. And that is, I want to look better, I want to feel better, and I want to perform better. Creatine hits all of those angles. So yes, your 16-year-old high school son can use that safely. It just kind of putting that out there. We handled that in that podcast too, because we got so many questions about it. And think about it this way: like if there's something that your 16-year-old son could be utilizing, or daughter, yes. I just say that because it usually comes up around the boys,
typically,
right? Yeah. That is. Like, think about this, like all the things that they're faced with and all the things that are being put in front of them or marketed to them to get bigger muscles, to look better, to feel better, maybe perform better on the field, the court, the mat, whatever else. Like creatine's a good one.
Yeah.
Like that's one like I would encourage with all the other things that they could be asking you about or potentially putting in their system and maybe already doing. Like that's not one you should be worried about. And again, I would encourage it in a lot of cases. It's not a magic bullet for anybody on any side of that triangle whatsoever, But if you're going to make an investment, this is a very inexpensive one to make, and with little to no risk factor. So, I'm just, if you're putting in hundreds of dollars into your supplement, regimen per month or whatever, like this is going to occupy a very small amount of that budget, but it will yield several benefits.
I mean, I think it's funny. I think it's probably like some of the awareness of people with teenagers and their caffeine intake. I feel like that's kind of gone up a lot. People aren't even worried about that at all, but they're worried about creatine, when I feel like caffeine has a little bit more, even though as I sip on a caffeine drink here, like there's a lot of more potential negative side effects, especially for an adolescent. But I think it's interesting too, because even from that time you guys did that episode, like there's been some newer studies about the cognitive benefits. And there even like there's a study about like, on, the subjects were sleep deprived and taking even a larger dose. I think it was
up to like 20 milligrams.
I think it was 20 milligrams, and like seeing a performance increase from like a cognitive standpoint, which creatine's been around for forever. Even when I was a teenager, I started taking it, and it was always kind of marketed as, this like performance thing. So it's kind of cool now to see the benefits of almost anyone can benefit from it at this point, especially from that kind of side of things. So.
Yeah, it's become an everyone supplement. It's become a longevity supplement, not just a sports performance supplement that it was for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. So again, like you can go back and listen to the episode 83. You just mentioned the caffeine one. We covered that one too, very specifically in the energy drinks episode that we did. And you make a good point, but Steve and I also made a case for why these things aren't that bad. Yeah. And people, it's funny that the messages I was getting after that, oh, cool. So I can tell my wife, that it's okay, for me to be drinking these things again, or whatever the case was. I thought that was interesting. But the point of that being is when you look at the two most studied, like ergogenic type of supplements that people are adding for increased performance, there's two, and they're the most studied to date, and probably that ever will be, at least in my lifetime, is creatine and caffeine.
Yeah.
And they're both great, but there's great benefits to both. Obviously, how much is too much? That's an individual thing, but we talk about that in that episode as well. All right, so moving on to another unsung supplement that, I think the majority of people are probably deficient on, and probably should be taking more for the benefits that it can give you from, again, hitting that performance, also health and wellness and longevity stage, would be
magnesium.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So magnesium, commonly deficient. Most people are not getting enough magnesium from their diet. I feel like magnesium has also had a little bit of an uptick. I would say primarily when it comes to stress and sleep, because if you haven't noticed, we're a pretty stressed out and sleep deprived society. So that was where I began to see a lot more requests for it back in my supplement shop days. It was for sleep and for stress. Like, I'm stressed out, I sleep like shit. I've heard magnesium might help with that. Magnesium plays a huge role in the body. It's one of the macro minerals that we should be getting in large doses every day, along with your sodium, along with your calcium, along with potassium. These the Mount Rushmore of minerals that we need to be getting every day, essential minerals. So magnesium, I think I've heard 300 different.
I've heard 500 to 600.
Yeah, it plays a role in 300 different bodily reactions. It plays a role in 400 different bodily reactions. Magnesium plays countless roles in your body when it comes to your brain health, when it comes to your heart health, muscular health, digestive health. Like, really, it runs the whole gamut. So when it comes to magnesium, the question always becomes, what magnesium should I be taking? I would say the most common one, the one that you will find at your drugstore, that'll probably be the cheapest version, is your magnesium oxide. And that's going to be the first, this bottle at CVS, Walgreens, whatever, it says magnesium, that's what I should be taking, right? Magnesium. I would not recommend magnesium oxide. Magnesium oxide is very poorly absorbed. So your magnesium oxide that magnesium oxide that you're getting for $7.99, you may be only getting 30 to 40% of the magnesium that contains. If you are constipated, however, magnesium oxide, great choice. As far as the laxative effect, that is going to be your magnesium oxide. If that is what you need, then maybe go with some magnesium oxide. One that fits the bill, even if it's for constipation, but for some of the other benefits that I mentioned, magnesium citrate, I would say that's probably the most common form aside from magnesium oxide. But we could get into, all the different forms: magnesium citrate, your magnesium taurate, your magnesium glycinate, your magnesium, 3 and 8. So anyone that you guys want to talk about first, as far as magnesium sources? Or
I take glycinate.
The glycinate.
Glycinate, that's what we take too on a everyday basis.
Yeah, that's kind of become, I would say, like the cool kids magnesium, the insider magnesium, that one, and the 3 and 8. The magnesium glycinate is nice because it's bound to the amino acid glycine, and glycine has those stress relieving and anxiety relieving effects. So glycinate would be the one that I would recommend if the stress and sleep component is what you're looking for. And glycinate is nice because it also has less of a laxative effect than your magnesium citrate or your disaster pants magnesium oxide. The other cool one I like is magnesium 3 and 8. So we were talking off air beforehand, like, why do people take supplements? They take supplements so they can think more good, sleep more good, lose weight, get stronger,
look more good.
And what was the other one? I think there was one more.
Look gooder. I don't know.
Anyways, under the think more gooder category, the magnesium 3 and 8 is a form that actually crosses the blood-brain barrier, whereas other forms of magnesium do not. So that is tied with the nootropic type of magnesium, usually taken in the evening, and it can help improve memory function. So that's a cool one.
Hey, Steven, is there a magnesium supplement that contains all of those magnesiums?
You can find those. Yeah, you can find blends that contain multiple versions. Typically not the magnesium 3 and 8.
3 and 8, yeah.
Magtein is the trademark name for that, Magtein. That's usually standalone. It's usually the most expensive.
Yep.
Yeah, it's usually the most expensive one because that one is not... that one's somewhat lab created, whereas the other ones are a little bit more, quote unquote, natural. But yeah, you'll find combinations of like oxide, citrate, bisglycinate or glycinate. What's another one that, taurate is another one that might make its way in there.
So if I were looking at my multivitamin and it has magnesium in there, which magnesium do you think is comprised?
Probably oxide. Probably oxide or citrate. Yeah, it's cheap. And when it comes to minerals in general, like macro minerals, like your calcium, your magnesium, your potassium, there's a logistics when it comes to creating supplements. Like minerals are big. Like if you take a calcium supplement, anyone who's taken a calcium supplement, it's usually like a big ass tablet. Same thing with magnesium. It's usually a pretty big, there's a volume when it comes to minerals. So a multivitamin, you might only be getting, I don't know, maybe 20 milligrams of magnesium, something like that, when you should be getting 400 to 500 milligrams of magnesium per day would be the standard recommendation, my recommendation. So multivitamins probably not going to cut it.
Is a 3 and 8, is there like a saturation point, or is it something you can take like on an acute basis? Like, is there a nootropic effect?
Right now,
yeah, is there a nootropic
benefit?
Yes. Kind of like with the creatine when you're coming off being sleep deprived, and they
is that, or is it like
20?
It picks me up, or is it more of like a cumulative compounding benefit over time?
Cumulative.
Cumulative. I would say, it's probably not going to be like, I'm dragging a little bit today. Let me take some magnesium 3 and 8, and it's going to perk me up. All of a sudden, I'm limitless. Thinking, thinking through time. But what I've heard or what I've sort of experienced myself when I've taken it is the improved sleep and the improved like memory consolidation. So improved REM sleep, which then leads to improved memory formation and consolidation. You remember the previous day more clearly. If I could summarize my rambling just now.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's rambling at all. I think that's kind of what people are looking for. Like, well, how am I going to know this is working for me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you put in and you immediately feel this impact on. It's something that you have to have an awareness of kind of what's going on with you subjectively, as well as objectively. I was mentioning like blood testing and things like that. But on the subjective side, this is something that you would need to put in and not try to add too many things on top of it at the same time and expect that you're going to be able to identify what it is that's making this impact or not making this impact. And I think that's where people get impatient with these things. And I think that's where they actually make poor financial decisions with these things too, is they're like, oh, this is my answer to having, better brain cognition throughout the day and less brain fog. No, there's a lot of things that go into this. These things are supplements that can be aids to making sure you're handling all the fundamentals correctly. Obviously, sleep in general is probably trumps everything. And then we talk about obviously nutrition, exercise, and stress management as kind of the 4 pillars there. But yeah, you're not going to get that from just taking magnesium in any form for that matter.
I think people that is an issue with supplements in general. Totally. Is like this supplement produces benefit X. Well, I've been taking this for 4 days and I have not seen any difference in my sleep. This doesn't work. And then it just hangs out and gathers dust in the cabinet. I think that happens very frequently. Folks get all excited about this whole new world that this supplement is going to open up for them. And then when they don't see an immediate acute benefit, like, oh, this isn't even working. This isn't doing anything. Most of the time, supplements, they are supplementary. Go figure. They're there to fill in the margins. They have a compounding effect over time. There is some level of faith that goes into taking supplements that this needs to be taken for an extended period of time. And bit by bit, it's working in ways that may not be immediate, in subtle ways that may become more obvious when you back off. You look over the course of a year and it's like, wow, at this point last year, I slept like absolute shit. And now I don't even think about my poor sleep anymore. Now I sleep well all the time, but it wasn't like that change happened because you started taking magnesium for 5 days.
Yeah. There's again, that immediate gratification that people want from this financial decision that they just made and whatever they have made up in their mind. And that obviously varies from person to person. And I think about, again, immediate gratification and an expectation of results. And that's where things go awry.
I spent this money. Where's my result?
I spent this money. These guys said this. I read this thing from this study or this person or whatever, or this supplement company, has the best product and here's why. Yeah, a lot of what's in there could have a lot of value, but going back to consistency and being committed to the process of understanding how this stuff works for you as an individual is super important. And to the point of like the immediate gratification, there are so few things that you will get that from like a dietary supplement perspective. I mean, we talked about caffeine. That's one of those ones where you get like an immediate effect. Like especially if you're sensitive or acutely sensitive to caffeine, like right away when you put
feel
that,
it, yeah.
You feel that, you put that in there. Creatine, generally speaking, like if you're really on top of your strength training game, that is something that you will likely notice a result from in a very short period of time. When I say that, not in a day, but over a 10-day period, a 2-week period, you'll start to, if you're tracking or again, you're highly aware and in tune, you'll start to recognize, I got a little bit more gas in the tank set to set, or, in that first, few minutes of my workout where I'm hitting my primary lifts and I'm recovering a little bit differently now. I'm not quite as sore, or I'm feeling fuller. Those are things that they're starting to happen before you start seeing, 10 more pounds of muscle or, 50 more pounds on the bar that you're lifting or squatting or getting over or whatever the case is. So there's very few supplements that will give you that. I'm going to give this company a little plug right now, and that is BioPro. I've been working with those guys for a little over a year now, and that's one of the very few supplements or dietary supplements I've ever taken where I've almost immediately recognized a result. And I may be a little bit more aware than some folks with regard to how that worked for me, but the things that came up for me right away were the things that we're talking about right now, which was a deeper, more restful sleep immediately, which then I could draw lines to or connect dots to my mental clarity throughout the day. It wasn't that it was like this magic bullet to everything, but it was remarkable. And then my recovery from my workouts, which then obviously leads into so many other things as you go down the line, specific to, the soreness, right? My drive to get back into the gym, those little aches and pains that I might have and things like that. So I only bring those types of things up because you got to be careful about what your expectation is going into this. And the question I get all the time when somebody sends me a picture of something, whether it's BioPro or something else, like, hey, the question is always this: is it worth it, or does it work?
Does it work? Yeah.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Well, that's a very broad question. And I got lots of questions for you. I can only tell you how it's worked for me, and that's it, right? But I can't tell you the committing to that process of figuring that out for yourself is probably the most important thing. And why not start with a quality supplement to begin with and make sure you do your homework on, am I taking something that I might get a result from a quality perspective and a dosage perspective? So going back to the magnesium, and sort of talking about this, we talked about a lot of different forms of magnesium and those kind of things. You really want to get your arms around this, and this is why we're talking about it, because it can get a little bit confusing. And one of the things I would add to that, going back to the magnesium and the restfulness and the deeper sleep, is, the next question that comes up is, when should I take this? Right before I work out, right when I wake up in the morning? Do I have to get up at 2 a.m. and take that with my protein shake that I'm taking, which is, all different types of proteins? It's not just whey, all of that kind of, again, getting lost in the sauce. Yeah, majoring in the minors, yeah. Right? All that kind of stuff. But what I would say about magnesium is a good time to do this is later in the day. As you're trying to wind down, it can help you unwind from the day, to calm the brain, calm yourself, as you're trying to get into that more restful sleep, so you can compound maybe the effects or the impacts of this particular supplement by taking it pre-bedtime as you're trying to kind of unwind, and then think about how that impacts your recovery, your workouts, right? Your life, your capacity during the day, and those kind of things. So that's how this stuff all interplays. Again, not a magic bullet. There's a lot of interplay with a lot of other things, but I like taking it at the end of the day because I think it's helpful there for me, just in kind of unwinding my brain, calming down from the course of the day, and then obviously getting into that deeper restful sleep that most people need.
Yeah, they're facilitators. I think that would be a good way. Both creatine and magnesium are facilitators. The creatine may facilitate improved performance in the gym, your ability to increase the intensity, the volume, etc. And magnesium facilitates maybe a better night's sleep for you, or a number of other different benefits. So it's not like it produces the result on its own. It facilitates your body's natural processes to get you, really what we're trying to do is correct how we've jacked ourselves up by our modern lifestyles a lot of times. So, and as far as just one more point, as far as when to take it, because that is a question that comes up all the time. Broadly speaking, generally speaking, what I usually recommend is whenever it will make it into your mouth most consistently, and there are exceptions to that. Yes, there are supplements that might be a little bit better to take in the morning or the evening, but if you had to just pick, whenever it's going to get into your mouth most consistently. Same thing with the form. Well, should I take the powder form or the tablet or the capsule or the gummy? Whatever you are going to take most consistently, whatever isn't going to end up sitting in your cabinet gathering dust, that's going to be the most effective time or the most effective format for you.
Agreed 100%.
Nice.
All right, one of the other conversations that we've had, we did an entire episode on this one as well, and that was on adaptogens.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about the adaptogen thing, because that gained a lot of ground in the last few years as well. Again, the events we were talking about, there was a guy in a company, people kind of know this guy, his name's Joe Rogan, who really started to talk about this, and it got very, very popular. And that brought it to light. And these are things that have been known through like Ayurvedic medicine and Eastern medicine for a very long time. And it just kind of brought it to the West a little bit more, again, awareness. And so people started looking into it a little deeper. And then again, there were a lot of products that came out as a result, because there was something to sell, right? And there was money to be made on it. But moving into the adaptogen side of things and kind of what those things do and how they help you, I really like this one, because I think most people can benefit from it in some way. And again, we're trying to hit all sides of that thing. I want to look better, feel better, be gooder, look gooder, think gooder, all those kind of things. This thing wraps right into that.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the one that's gotten the most hype, and then I'd like to honorable mention of another one that you may not have heard of that does a lot of similar things. So the hype is ashwagandha. Most people at this point have heard of ashwagandha if you follow health, fitness. Now for several years, I would say probably it's been about 4 or 5 years since the ashwagandha craze first hit, or people are like, well, ashwagandha, what? Right. That's a funny sounding word. Ashwagandha, though, is actually at this point fairly well researched and fairly well backed in terms of its positive effects. When we talk about adaptogens, just like it sounds, adaptogens are typically herbs or compounds that help you adapt. state it as generally as possible or as broadly as possible, resilience when it comes to adaptogens. These are herbal compounds that are going to help your body be more resilient to stress and help you adapt to life a little bit more effectively. So ashwagandha, I mean, we hear about ashwagandha when it comes to, I'd say like stress and anxiety is probably the most common issue that people are looking to fix with ashwagandha. When it comes to kind of the performance side of things, testosterone, we hear about ashwagandha is going to raise your testosterone. There is some evidence to suggest that ashwagandha could boost your testosterone or at least support your current testosterone levels. Mood is a big one that comes up with ashwagandha. Libido is another one that comes up with ashwagandha. And at this point, there is a pretty good amount of research suggesting that there is something to this when it comes to ashwagandha. As far as your dosing, one thing that I noticed when I first started taking ashwagandha, this was now probably like 2018 was when I was first taking it. It did have a little bit of a stimulant effect. So people are like, well, I'm taking this to reduce my stress, to help me sleep better. And this is giving me a stimulant effect. That was something I experienced. But the thing with adaptogens is they kind of fit in where you need them, which sounds like woo-woo. That sounds like some hooey. But it does kind of work that way, where if you're a little stressed out or you're a little anxious, it might take the edge off for you. If you're dragging a little bit, it might pick you up a little bit. So that was something that I noticed as far as ashwagandha was a stimulant effect. I don't get that effect as much anymore, maybe a little bit. With a larger dose that I take daily now, I take about 1,000 milligrams pretty much every single day in a product that has a bunch of other stuff in it. But yeah, as far as benefits goes, I mean, yeah, the stress, the anxiety, the athletic performance, the mood benefits, the sexual performance. Ashwagandha has a lot of things going for it.
Yeah, it's for males and females, across the board. It's interesting that you mentioned about the stimulant versus relaxing type of effect.
Sedative, yeah.
Sedative type of effect. I wouldn't really call it that.
Yeah, not sedative, yeah.
But I would look at that. I would look at, like kind of on the counter to that, like with medication, it's if you look at sort of some of the prescribed medications that people are prescribed to help them sort of with anxieties and some of their emotional health and the adverse side effects they can get from that, sometimes it makes it much worse. So similar in that sense, if you're kind of thinking about, hey, this might impact you differently than something else. And the other thing you mentioned there is like, again, with this kind of re-emergence or emergence of and popularity of it, it started to wind up in a lot of things. Like you mentioned, you're taking in a compound and a supplement that also onboards a lot of other things. That's a good way to get all of these things into your system, so you don't have a million bottles of standalone supplements sitting on your counter or whatever. I don't have 5 pill containers. I have 1. But you'll find it in things. But again, like sometimes it'll just go on the label, right, to sell the product. How much are you getting? What's the actual dosage of what's being on or what you're onboarding, and then what else are you onboarding in that product? So you can get it standalone. It definitely exists that way, but there are lots of other products out there, like adaptogenic type products that also are something else.
Greens is a pretty common one that it makes its way into. And speaking on the potency of it, because I think this is important to mention, when it comes to adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha, as well as rhodiola rosea, which I'll mention as well. Usually you want to look for a standardized extract. So usually it's not, like the ashwagandha that does the thing. There's usually an effective compound, or an active compound rather, in it. And when it comes to ashwagandha, those are called withanolides. So a standardized extract of ashwagandha is usually 3% withanolides. So you can look on the label and it might say something like, ashwagandha, 500 milligrams, standard 3% withanolides. So that is basically stating that it has a potency of the active compound in it. So if you find a product that's just like some janky ashwagandha, 500 milligrams.
Proprietary blend.
Or it doesn't make any mention of it being a standardized extract, that might be a product to be a little bit wary of, like what is the potency of what I'm actually getting.
Dig deeper.
So that's something to look for on the label. I'm trying to, how is it spelled? It's WITHALIDE. LIDES with anolides. I don't think I
Something like
spelled that right, but
I don't spell too good.
But in any case, that's what to look for when it comes to ashwagandha. The other one, the honorable mention one that I wanted to bring up is rhodiola rosea, because that one has not gotten as much hype, but I think it actually has just as potent effects, primarily for like physical resilience, stress resilience, and depression. Rhodiola has actually been studied for its mood elevating effects as well as its physical performance benefits. So if that's really more what you're seeking, rhodiola rosea could be the one to look for that you may not have heard of before. Rosavins are the active compound in that. So that one I know how to spell. That's ROSAVIN, Rosavin. And that's usually, I forget exactly what the standardized percentage is, but look for that on the label as far as a rhodiola rosea product.
Yeah, I think these are things that people have experimented with or try to onboard, but they're oftentimes onboarding with a lot of other things. So, again, what exactly are you looking for? What are your expectations? And within that, like if you're onboarding with a bunch of other stuff, sometimes it's tough to kind of understand. So it's very tough, actually, I would say. So
you may find those two combined as well, the ashwagandha and the rhodiola, in like an adaptogenic blend, Ayurvedic herbal blend, something like that.
I've seen it in a couple of products, or some companies that do a really good job with it, and do those things just together. So you're getting that blend, just the rhodiola and the ashwagandha together versus it coming on board with a lot of other stuff. I love that you put that in there as the honorable mention. As we get into number 5 here, we actually have another honorable mention that we'll talk about, and one that we think is a bit overrated. So it's kind of a bonus here. But let's move to the next one. So we talked about like the adaptogenic type stuff. One of the other episodes we did about a year ago was one on nootropics and the difference between nootropics and adaptogens and the different things. But let's talk about this one because I love this one a lot. This one can also be like you can get an adaptogenic nootropic blend. So you may find this one in those as well, but go ahead, go for it.
The lion's mane mushroom. So the lion's mane and medicinal mushrooms in general, I think, have gained popularity probably along the same timeline.
Thanks,
as adaptogens. Yeah. I mean, going all the way back, like Host Defense is the brand that Paul Stamets formed. He was kind of like the first guy to bring these weird looking, weird name medicinal mushrooms. Like, oh, is this going to get me high? Am I going to freak out? Right. Maybe that's what I want. But these are the types of mushrooms that are going to benefit your health. A lot of times it's immune function. The one we'll mention, the honorable mention, actually has some anti-cancer properties. But when it comes to lion's mane, probably the most aesthetically pleasing of the mushrooms. It's got a big fluffy mane in the wild. It actually tastes pretty good in food as well. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to lion's mane, we're talking about brain health, cognitive function, nootropic benefits. So lion's mane, probably the key, what does it do? It helps with brain-derived neurotropic factor, so BDNF, essentially the neurogenesis of the creation of new brain cells. So lion's mane, again, is one of those things where, well, if I take lion's mane, am I going to be smarter like right now? No, probably not. And for some of you, maybe never. But sorry, I had to. But it's one that's going to be compounding benefit over time. It is neuroprotective. It protects your brain from degradation over time. And by protecting your brain and by encouraging or aiding in the creation of new brain cells, it can keep you functioning and thinking more gooder over a longer period of time. And there is a growing body of evidence supporting this, or growing body of research supporting lion's mane.
Yeah, love that one. Again, it's often onboarded in other things, so you can get kind of blends of this nootropic, adaptogenic stuff, and it'll be kind of in the brain health section of the store, of the supplement store you might be shopping in or whatever. Again, we'll direct you to maybe how to find some products that have that in there in a little bit. So, but I love that one too. I was not on board with the nootropics and the adaptogens until only just a couple of years ago. And I can tell you, like, there were some marked differences in things that I noticed, particularly, and it actually was on the podcast. I was taking some supplements, I was taking them consistently. And I noticed when I took them consistently and I was doing that before about an hour and a half before the podcast, particularly on the adaptogen side of things, man, like I was switched on in a kind of a different way. Just my brain was way in front of my mouth in a lot of ways. And that's how I noticed it. So that was what for me. So if you're one of those people that's, working and having to be switched on all the time, that was one thing that I noticed was a real benefit for me, was just, I felt more switched on and just more present, if that's a way to kind of, maybe you can kind of relate to it. So
like a fluidity, a processing speed,
100%,
those types of
things. That processing speed is a really good way of looking at this. Things were faster. So if you're into, look, man, if you're into performance in any kind of a way where you have to process a lot of information at any given time, or you're in a profession or something where you have to process information, obviously if you're in some kind of a sport where things move fast, and you have to make quick decisions and things like that, it could be helpful there. Obviously, just more on the professional side of things, if you're managing a lot of stuff, right? And you got a lot of people and you got a lot of things moving in a lot of different directions, maybe this stuff is helpful for you, which is one of the reasons we recommend it so frequently, as well as just, again, the overall better well-being as you're trying to attack all sides of that health and wellness sort of and performance and aesthetics triangle. All right, the honorable mention that doesn't really fit into, I wouldn't call it like a supplement as like a dietary supplement in the ways or in the categories that we've kind of outlined here. This one drops more into the food supplement category, if you want to look at it that way, and that is protein powder.
Oh yeah, protein powder. I've heard of it a few times. Yeah, protein powder, I would say it was almost too obvious to include in the list, and it does kind of fall, in my opinion, it does fall more under the lines of this is food. And I think that's actually important to state, because again, people get weird perspectives on protein powder. Protein powder, that's for bodybuilders. That's going to make me big. That has steroids in it. If only it had steroids in it. But it's a food supplement. So many people struggle to get in their protein intake. Maybe many people struggle to hit their protein goal, even if they are aware that I need to be consuming more protein. Getting in all of the protein via, whole foods is challenging for many people. And the protein powders or protein supplements in general can help you plug a gap. That's really what they're there for. That's really how I would recommend using them. Do you want to rely on them? No. But if you're consistently finding that you are a little bit short of your protein goal, or you're short on time, or you're hungry between meals, you need kind of a bridge between meals, that's where the protein powder comes in. And, for women out there, no, taking protein powder is not going to make you jacked. It's not going to make you bulky. It is especially helpful. I find it is especially helpful for my female clients who do tend to struggle with getting in large volumes of food. This is a lot of food. This makes me feel really full, really bloated. How could I possibly consume this much protein? That's where the protein supplement can come in. It's easier to get down, and you're getting a concentrated protein source. So, I mean, it was almost too obvious to include because I consider it it's food. Yes, it is a supplement, but it's also food. So that's, at the end of the day, if we were all consuming an absolutely flawless diet, entirely whole food based all the time, as natural as it gets, we probably wouldn't need a few of the supplements on this list. But that's not the reality for basically anybody anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of that whole starting a conversation. That's a non-starter when you're like, oh, if you just ate this way, it's just not reality. Ask me how I know, right? Personally and professionally, after doing it for this long. But the thing on the protein powder that I would also say is it's too easy, right? And again, this is kind of how it almost didn't make the list, is it's too easy to do and to get it in, and it's too available, right? It's there. It's there. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons why people struggle to get their protein intake taken care of on a daily basis. And even if you're doing it great 4 or 5 days a week, there's a couple other days during the week that you need to make up. This is where this comes in. Does it have to be used every day? No. Can it be used every day? Absolutely, yes. And it's a great way to get like somebody that is really trying to get a handle on all of the things, right? Supplementation, sleep, workouts, all of that. It really is too easy to just like, hey, we could make up a lot of ground in a very large, a high value part of the formula that you're trying to correct for yourself through just using that protein powder, right? To, again, meet your macronutrient needs, meet your caloric intake, avoid feeling, sick to your stomach, all that kind of stuff. Certainly there's an adaptation period and adjustment period for people. If you haven't been taking this stuff, don't start with 80 grams of protein powder a day. It should never be the bulk of the protein that you're taking in, but it is a great way to make up that last 20%, 15% of your daily protein intake. So again, I know it might sound obvious to folks, but it's just, again, it's one of those things that is kind of a life jacket, but also like a necessity. When you're trying to achieve all of these different things. Why you wouldn't do it, I don't know. Like I like why you wouldn't have it around. I don't really have an answer for that. I would have it around. And there's so many different brands and forms and flavors, and there's vegan and vegetarian and keto and all these different things. And then that gets into like, when should I take it? Should I take it before my workout? Should I take it first thing in the morning? We're majoring in the minors there. Right? Like, stop it. Just get it in. Make sure you're getting your protein. So again, too easy. Get it in. It provides all kinds of other stuff outside of your just your protein. We talk about amino acid profiles, which really is built into the protein. Some of these things are actually onboarded with other things. You can get protein supplements that also have creatine in them at some level. I don't necessarily recommend that, but again, when you're looking at all those bottles that you have and all those things you have to you're trying to get in through the day, there's blends of this stuff, so you can get it in that way. The other thing is like if you're trying to onboard your protein and your creatine, and you're already shaking that thing up in a shaker or putting it in a smoothie or whatever else, it's an easy way to add that stuff in. Going back to powders versus pills versus gummies versus capsules or whatever else, it's a great delivery system, right? Like if you're already drinking something or putting something in your body that has to go into a bottle that has to get in quickly for convenience, for whatever the reasons are. Protein supplements help you do those other things as well. Again, going back to greens and nootropics and adaptogens and all that kind of stuff, it can all go in the same time. Just get it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as protein goes, I think you pretty much hit it. Like it's an everybody supplement. For sure. And if whey protein bothers your stomach or dairy bothers your stomach, get a plant-based protein. We can open a whole other can of worms as far as plant versus animal.
Yeah. And yes, your 16-year-old daughter or son can onboard a protein supplement, same as creatine, and get the same benefits that you would as an adult for different reasons, right? And for them, it's often just meeting their caloric need and their protein goals for the day as we grow up, and they're faced with all kinds of choices, right, in the pantry or in the refrigerator or at the convenience store or in school lunches and things like that. It's just a nice little safety net of sorts. All right, last thing here as we move on and wrap it up, and that is we're talking about this. There is a kind of there's some overrated stuff out there. There's a ton of those that are probably overrated supplements, but this one we felt was worthy of mentioning, particularly this time of year. We're recording this in the winter. We're just about a week away from Christmas right now. Stuff comes up. Immune systems are being challenged. Our illustrious governor just announced a statewide emergency for bird flu. We've had no human-to-human transmission, but it's time to shut everything down. And the first places to get shut down are going to be the gyms and the salons when bird flu takes over the state. My point of that is people are highly aware of their immune system, either because they're sick or they don't want to get sick, or people that they know are sick. And so they tend generally onboard this one a ton, thinking it's going to be some magic bullet and keep them safe.
Yeah. So how this came up, I know that was the drum roll for me to say it, but as far as how this came up, why it was on my mind, I had a client mention that he was sick recently, and at the suggestion of his daughter, he took what we identified was maybe about 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C. So vitamin C, that I think like emergency really made everything worse when it came to like, I'm sick, I need to take these like hyper doses of vitamin C. want to make it abundantly clear. Vitamin C is an essential vitamin. You should be getting in vitamin C. Vitamin C is actually relatively easy to get through your diet. It's not something that many people are deficient in unless you are a pirate in the 1800s and you're getting scurvy. Vitamin C is not. Vitamin C deficiency is very uncommon. So that's one reason why it's overrated.
Yeah, one of the things you just said there, and this is to make that point, like you mentioned scurvy, and that it was because of the lack of meat, right? And animal protein that are getting in. But people don't understand this. Like you get plenty of vitamin C for you people that are on carnivore, you're probably getting plenty of vitamin C. It's your beef is loaded with that. Like your animal protein is loaded with vitamin C. So like again, going back to like how much do you need to take and like how overrated this stuff gets. People are like, you have to supplement with it or there's just no way you're going to get enough. No, not even close. You're likely, even if you're eating like an asshole, you're likely getting plenty of vitamin C in your diet. Sorry to hijack that. But.
No, yeah. And it's, then the thought process is, well, no, that's only when I'm sick that I take like massive amounts of vitamin C. You're not really doing yourself any favors other than when I asked my client, so how was that going for you as far as the 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C? He's like, yeah, I had the runs.
Yeah,
really? Really? Yeah, it's about 10 times as much vitamin C as I would suggest taking in one dose. You're not going to speed your recovery from your sickness by taking shitloads of vitamin C. So that's really why I would just state it, why I lumped it in as overrated. It's not to say that, taking vitamin C is bad, or if you
there's no benefit
enjoy supplementing with vitamin C,
knock yourself out.
Yeah, go ahead, but keep it between 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams. If you're going to take vitamin C, I would suggest taking like a buffered vitamin C, like an ester C is a very common brand name or trademarked form versus the plain old ascorbic acid, where you're going to get heartburn. It's not going to treat your stomach very well. Vitamin C. You don't need to take huge amounts of vitamin C.
Yeah. So just in wrapping this up to give people some direction, we went through our list of our 5 favorites or five most recommended here. If you're curious on like where to go to get those things, or maybe compare and contrast to what you're currently taking, we've already provided a free guide. It's sitting on our website. If you go to rdftrainonline.com and you click the store button, you'll see a huge menu of things that we have in our store, but within there, you'll also see our free guides selection. You can hit that. We have our supplement roadmap that we put together here. Steve did a really good job with that. Kind of talks about all the different things kind of in general, and then breaks down, kind of where you might fit this in, but kind of give you some guidance and maybe some recommendations on what might work best for you, and then specifically some products that we really like, some direct links to go get those. Try to make it as easy and as frictionless as possible. These are companies that we utilize ourselves. We put into our own bodies and recommend to our clients to do that as well. And we've been very careful about who we've sort of quote unquote partnered with in that sense. I'm always very careful about who I recommend and who I don't recommend. I don't recommend anything I don't use myself or haven't tried. And again, I have my own personal anecdotes, but part of that is just making sure that people are getting the quality of what they need, right? And then obviously the quantity of what they need and how that matches up on the financial side with what you're paying for, where the stuff is sourced, where it's coming from, how it's packaged, how it's stored, how it's shipped. It all matters. And again, going back to majoring in the minors, like some of that stuff can be very negligible in terms of the larger picture, but again, if you're going to make a financial investment in something, right, and you're making an investment in your health, it just makes sense to do your homework there. So we did that for you in a lot of ways. Maybe it's not for you. That's fine. Maybe you just want to read the guide and pick up some tips and again, maybe read a little deeper into kind of what some of these companies provide versus what other ones provide. But go get that. So again, it's rdftrainonline.com. Go to the store and then go down to the free guides section. And when you get in there, you'll see all of our free guides. But that one, the supplement roadmap, is free for you. All you got to do is hit it. It's free, and we'll email it to you immediately.